And to know where he goes, let's bring in Fox News contributor and the Washington Times opinion editor, the great hog call, and Charlie Hurt. Charlie, good to see you. What do you make of Joe Biden on the world stage? To Dagan's point, doesn't he have to bring some economic gravitas, not just a photo op?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these people only speak one language, and that is power and self-interest. And Joe Biden has gone, from the moment that he got into the White House, he's demonstrated that he does not care about American self-interest, and has displayed no power whatsoever. And so the fact that you don't even have Putin or Xi Jinping attending this G20 because they have so little respect for Joe Biden, I think says a lot. And remember, this is the same guy. He can't even get the Saudis to return his phone calls when he's trying to desperately do something about oil prices. And this is what you get with it's not just not America first, it's America last. And you have the Biden administration. It's so funny that somebody like Donald Trump comes along and starts talking about America first, and all of these people think that it's like a dirty word or like you've said something offensive, when every single foreign leader at the G20, and certainly Putin or Xi Jinping, they all believe that their country, they are interested in their best interest of their country. And it's like Joe Biden is the only guy that is not interested in the best interest of his own country.
He doesn't have to go anywhere, Charlie. He can stay right here at home and start rebuilding what they've destroyed in terms of our fossil fuel business. But what they do is when Saudi Arabia and OPEC and Russia extend the production cuts, what do? Take a hatchet to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which goes against Congress, which it was in the tax cuts of 2017. I digress. This is on purpose. They've re-entered a tacit, quiet nuclear deal with Iran. Anyway.
But don't you think that those decisions yesterday, that decision yesterday to cut off our nose to spite our face with Anwar and kill those drilling leases, I think that we're going to look back at that date yesterday as the day that the bottom fell out of the Biden administration. You cannot find a single Democrat in this country who's a normal person who's not hurting from gas prices. And you can draw a direct line from the policies of this White House to the prices people are paying at the pump with a decision like this. And they're going to pay a price for it, and they should.
Charlie, when Joe Biden hurts, he pivots and starts to attack Donald Trump on his economic record. But voters, they don't seem to think he's actually given them much to work with. 59% of voters, they disapprove of Biden's handling of the economy. 37% of voters approve. That's according to a recent Wall Street Journal poll, which also shows 51% of voters felt that Trump had a strong record on accomplishments as President. Biden, he's just got 40%. And one of the biggest numbers I've seen recently is only 45% of voters think that Joe Biden cares about people like them. And in politics, if less than half the people think you care about people like them, you are in dire straits.
Right. Right. And of course, all of these policy decisions that this administration has made is hurting people, making people poor, making people feel less safe. But then you have this other track that's going on at the same time where we're learning more and more every day about how much the Biden family has been selling access to the U.S. government and changing policies of the U.S. government and making a fortune from foreign adversaries to do this. And you start to ask people, the perennial question is, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The answer is easy no. Then the other question is, who does Joe Biden work for? Because he's not working for me. And the more people say that and they say, oh, is he working for China? Is he working for Ukraine? It's kind of hard to make the argument that he's not working for them, but he sure as heck isn't working for us.
Right. No, it's America first to America last to all Americans on their ass.
Yep.
The Veep stakes, meantime, are on, and there's some chit-chat in South Dakota. Former President Trump will be there tonight, and so will Governor Kristi Noem, who's expected to be on the stage alongside President Trump and give her official endorsement. Could they be running mates? Noem says she's not ruling anything out.
We have not discussed it at all, and I would say everybody, if asked to serve in any role, should consider it, especially right now when you watch what's happening across this country.
Charlie?
One of the things, the most annoying things about politicians is when they demur on questions like that. Kudos to her for answering it directly. Of course she would consider it. The other thing is, Ron DeSantis likes to talk about his record with COVID in Florida, and he did the right thing for much of the time. But if you want to look around the country and find one governor who never did anything wrong, never shut a single business down, Kristi Noem is that person. South Dakota never shut anybody down. Nobody was ever not essential from day one. And the reason was, it wasn't because she didn't think that maybe it might be a good idea to shut a business down or something like that. Her reasoning was she didn't have the authority to do it. And she's right about it. And neither did any of these other governors. And so that, to me, if we want to make this Veep stakes all about COVID policy, there's nobody, and maybe there is another governor out there who's got a record as good as hers. I don't know who that would be, but it's certainly better than Ron DeSantis's. It's better than even Trump's. She has a sterling record when it comes to protecting the constitutional rights of her constituents, of the people of South Dakota during the pandemic.
And she has a backbone because the left was attacking her viciously, and she never backed down. She was amazing. Charlie, hang on, stay right there with us, okay?
Instead of securing our ports of entry to fix the migrant crisis, the Biden administration is working to make sure that when migrants do enter the country illegally, they have to stay in Texas.
Is that Biden's way to get no longer fellow Democrat Eric Adams to pipe down? Edward Lawrence is at the White House with more. Edward.
Well, Dagan and Sean, the LA Times saying the Biden administration formulating a Remain in Texas plan. Now, according to the Times, this plan would keep migrants who illegally cross the border in the area where they cross until their court date. Well, that would pull in other states like New Mexico and battleground state of Arizona. The report says this would be in response to the outcry from blue states and cities like New York City in dealing with the surge of migrants being relocated. Republicans say just stop the flow at the border instead of letting them flood in.
We don't have the resources. We're asked to put out even more money and more taxes. And Mayor Adams has no solution. They don't want Remain in Mexico. They don't want Title 42. They don't want to build the wall. They just want to blame everybody and take more money and just make us pay for more. And guess what that brings you? The more money you put in, the more you get.
New York City Mayor Adams blaming Texas Governor Greg Abbott for busing migrants. In doing so, giving away the total number in New York City. Listen.
Started with a madman down in Texas, decided he wanted to bus people up to New York City. 110,000 migrants. We have to feed, clothe, house, educate the children, wash their laundry sheets, give them everything they need, health care.
And here's the rub. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he sent 13,300 migrants to New York City, meaning the federal government shipped the other 88% to the city. This is also just a fraction of the 5.9 million migrants that are encountered at the southern border with Mexico since President Biden came into office, most of them coming through Texas. Back to you.
Edward Lawrence, thank you. It wasn't a madman in Texas. It's a madman in the White House who's the cause of this problem.
Let's bring Charlie Hurt back in. The border's a mess. Biden's keeping the migrants in Texas to shut up his liberal friends in liberal states. Meantime, the northern border near Canada just saw the largest surge of migrants in 10 years. And on top of that, fixing the wide open border, they're blaming Trump. The Government Accountability Report says that Trump's border wall caused significant cultural and environmental damage. Charlie Hurt. Charlie, isn't it amazing at how quickly Joe Biden can seal a border? It's the Texas border.
Right. It's so amazing. These people are so dishonest. They're so stupid. They're so hypocritical. It is so amazing. This is, and it's as if we haven't been talking about this for 30 years. We've been talking about this. And it's just occurring to Eric Adams that this might be a problem. And the answer is a remain in Texas, which, of course, let's not forget, that's a play off of Donald Trump's brilliant strategy of remain in Mexico, where you don't let them in the first place and you adjudicate them out there in Mexico, because Mexico won't deal with them either. Mexico's going to send them back. And so at the end of the day, Donald Trump did build a wall and did make Mexico pay for it, because the Mexican government wouldn't let them into their country because they had to stay in Mexico. It was brilliant. But I mean, these people are so dishonest. They're so disgusting. If voters don't pay attention to all of this and realize all of this was predicted, and that we have been arguing against this for 25, 30 years, and it's these people who put this entire thing into play, then we don't deserve a better government. I hope these people pay the price for this. I hope they get thrown out of office. I hope the Democrat name is sullied for decades, because they deserve it for what they have done here. And I'm just glad that finally these people are admitting their mistakes, although they'll never actually admit that they were wrong about it.
And shame on Politico for writing an article like that. They're just such a political rag, Democrat rag. It's ridiculous.
They're the worst.
And you got to sit back like you've done and just laugh at them because it's so insane. Charlie Hurt, always a pleasure seeing you. Thank you for joining us.
Great to see you guys.